Hello, everybody, and welcome to Of Mind and Metal podcast. This is episode 4, featuring the one and only Zach Davis. Zach, how you doing?
I'm doing great. All right, first topic. You shouldn't need a mouthpiece. Your concept and focus should be so strong that when you look at the instrument, it resonates. That's why I put all of mine up before this started. It's because my concept is so clear that if I looked over at that trombone, it would just start singing. So you shouldn't even need a mouthpiece if you know what you're doing.
Save a lot of money too, you know.
Yeah, save a lot of money. Just conquer it. Right? What is it? What is your podcast called? Like Of Mind and Metal, of Brain and Brass, or whatever?
Of Mind and Metal. Of Brain and Brass is cool too, but Of Mind and Metal is the
that could be like another podcast that like outdoes us.
Oh.
And then
Hey,
we're
listen
like
to those two jocks
we're like
talk.
the Walmart brand.
Yes.
Like
That's like all of the guests that we have or are going to have, they form their own podcasts, and it's Of Brain and Brass or something like that.
And
they
they're like,
have more
yo,
than
those guys
100
were
viewers.
super dumb.
For sure. What's on your hat, Zach? What
Oh,
does it
Miss
say?
Angeline's. It's my favorite hat because it's yellow. I don't know why. I was staring at it and I was like, I need that hat. But now I have the same haircut as you, so I have to get into hats.
Whoa!
Dude.
My mind is so blown right now.
Man, it's weird.
Damn.
I have a funny shaped head. It just like really makes me. It just
so do I.
highlights how I've treated my body over the past like decade. I'm
Zach,
growing the
can you
hair
give us
back
like
out.
can you give us like a turnaround? Like can we
Yeah.
see
Oh yeah, all right. So I got a big scar on the back of my head too, from like my brother pushing me on a playground.
Oh, man, when did this happen?
When I shaved my head?
Yeah.
I think it was like 2 weeks ago. So
Wow.
Nichelle wanted a haircut because she had shaved her head earlier in lockdown, right?
Mhm.
And we learned that her hair, I cursed myself because I said, I hope that there is a process, a stage to this growing your hair out that you don't expect. And I hope it lasts longer than you want.
Yeah.
And that just totally screwed me because her hair was growing straight out. And like it's like this tall and it was just going straight out. She's like, I've never had short hair. I didn't know this is what happened.
Yeah.
Babe, that's not what happens. Like you shouldn't have 4-inch sticking straight up hair. So a friend of ours came over and like shaved the side. So now she has a hip haircut. And I realized that every single time I have to go anywhere, I put on a mask. So I tie my hair back. I'm like, well, masks aren't going away anytime soon. And they're just damaging it. I looked a little bit too much like an 80s rock star that hasn't let go of the past. So I just called it.
Man, it lasted for so long.
Yeah, I know. I don't even know what to do. I had to talk to a friend of mine. I'm like, how do I care for short hair? What do I do?
Nothing.
So the
Yeah,
real
exactly.
question,
Like, you don't have to do anything.
the real question is, has this affected your trombone playing? Like, are you able to produce a sound now that your hair is gone?
I've had to go back to using a mouthpiece, but other than that,
That is awesome. Oh man. Yeah, it's definitely much nicer to like not have to. I mean, when I didn't have hair nearly as long as you, but when I did have the long hair and then got it cut, I was like
yeah.
where is it all at? You know?
There are some things that I didn't know were just like phenomenal sensations. Like rolling over like in the cold side of a pillow
Mm-hmm.
on like a shaved head. That's pretty wild. I was a fan.
Yeah.
We have a garden, so I've had to water it right in the middle of the day and then just like turning it around and like just spraying my head. That feels great. I'm a fan.
Oh yeah.
And I bet your hair dries pretty fast out of the shower.
Oh yeah, it's like a 3-minute ordeal.
You don't even have to do anything.
Yeah, it used to be like, oh man, well I have to shower because my hair looks like butt before I go do this thing, and now I'm just like, well, I'll pick out my favorite yellow hat, and then I'll be fine.
Dude, there you go. That's awesome. All right. Well, let's get into it. So Zach, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your playing history and all the things you have undergone to where you are right now.
Oh.
Kind of loaded, but
I can give you a really short version or a really narrative version.
give us whatever you feel.
All right. So I did my undergrad at Texas Tech University in music education. And I was a trash person for like 2 years. I didn't do anything I was supposed to do. I just messed around and like partied and jumped in fountains and all sorts of stupid stuff. Broke windows. It was bad. And then I do know what happened. It was I auditioned it was either beginning of my junior year or the second half of my sophomore year. I auditioned and I was bumped from the top ensemble and I was pissed. And I'll still stand that I think it was one of my better auditions. So I was extra grumpy and I was like, you know what, as long as they're in there doing work, or somebody that's in that ensemble, I see them doing work, I'm doing work, because I was just angry. And I think that's where I had to actually start getting organized and productive. So then I found that when you put in that work, you're better at your instrument, right? And then it's more fun. And then like people might pay you to do it. So I started performing regionally in West Texas, and was like, I really kind of enjoy this. I'll audition for grad school. Only places that will pay me to go there. I was like, I'm not looking to rack up any more student loan debt. Like, I'm not going to be like a dentist. Like, the return on investment is pretty low. So I'm not going to go somewhere and throw cash. So I auditioned at quite a few places, and the best option I thought for me was University of Arkansas. So I got a graduate assistantship at University of Arkansas with Dr. Mixdorf. Knocked that sucker out in 2 years, which is way too fast. Like 2 years for a master's. Like you get there, and by the time you know what you're doing and how the school functions, it's time to think about getting out. So I told myself I've done well here too. I think that I've made a lot of improvement. I'll audition for grad school again. I was like, I think it would be really cool to have like Dr. Mixdorf's job or Professor Decker's job. Seems like they're living the dream for me. So I told myself I wasn't going to go anywhere that was not an elite institution. So I only auditioned at places that I viewed as top of the line, like blue chip programs, right? And then I told myself I wasn't going to go to that place unless I got a really sweet offer. So really what I kept doing is I kept giving myself outs. Is like, well, you know, if I don't get an assistantship, that's fine. I'll just use my band directing degree and I'll have a great life. And then at the end of my master's, I'm sure y'all have seen a ton of people that go get their master's and then go back to teaching. There's nothing wrong with that. It only made you a better musician. So it only makes you more qualified. But I figured if I had gambled on myself this far, I should do so again. So I ended up getting an assistantship offer at a few places, but the University of North Texas was the best option for me, because it was the closest I was going to get to teaching my own collegiate program. I was offered an assistantship somewhere else, and I remember talking to the professor, and they said, yeah, you don't really have to do anything. You know, it's great. It's just like a full ride with a little bit of money. I don't really know if I want to just like show up and make it up. Like, if I just wanted to practice a lot, I mean, I could just go to my parents' new like ranch house and be a ranch hand and play the trombone. Like, I want to teach. I want to actually do things. So at the University of North Texas, I got through my 3 years, I had my own studio of undergrads, which fluctuated from like 4 to 7 kids. I coached 1 to 2 chamber groups. I had a trombone choir the past 2 years. And really, I think one of the biggest things is once a week they had a TF meeting. So I'd get to go into this room with like Steve Menard, and Natalie Mannix, and Tony Baker, and sit down and see what it takes to actually run a studio. And when I encountered issues, I can go in and be like, this thing is happening. It's ridiculous. What do I do? And they'll have worked with that. So, and it was definitely the right choice. My decision to be at UNT, I think, has been the best in my career. In a really weird way, I think it opened my eyes to my own potential. Because everywhere I'd been thus far, I had been very insulated, where I would show up and kind of be the guy.
Yeah.
And there's something to be said for that. There is something to be said for all of that practical real world experience that I probably wouldn't have gotten. You know, if I had gone to a Juilliard or Eastman, I may not have had the performing opportunities come as easily. But I showed up to UNT expecting to be fairly low on the totem pole and immediately ended up being in the mix with those guys. So that, what word am I looking for? Ratified my talent to me. Like, it finally made it real. Like, you've done work, this is paying off. So I've just reached close to the end of the road. I have 1 more academic class I'm taking this semester, and then it's quals and dissertation, and I should be done, should be out.
Nice.
It's gonna be so nice.
Yeah,
Just
I
like
bet.
no more like 14 to 16-hour days. Oh, it's gonna be wild.
Yeah. Dang. That is quite a lot. Um, Nick, were you
So
gonna say something?
what skills? So take us through this development process here, starting from Texas Tech to Arkansas to North Texas, and like what did you learn from each person? Like where you were at, like what did you get that you needed? Take it, ending where you're at now.
What I got from Texas Tech is patience and grace.
Mm-hmm.
And then I really do think a very large part of it as well was investment in uh, I don't know. I don't know if I'd call myself like the trouble person, but it was very clear that I was like, hey, I'm here at the School of Music. I'm doing what I need to do. I'm getting good grades. But I'm gonna go party super hard after this. It's new. Right. So I made a lot of really poor choices, and I had professors just work with me there and let me work through that, and didn't, try to shame me or come at me super hard or anything. So I gained a lot of grace from specifically two professors that I can think of. Professor Decker, my trombone teacher. I showed up, and I think the most he ever like came at me or told me I needed to shape up was, he's like, well, the lesson wasn't great, but when you come in here, it's my job to make you better in this hour. And I feel like we did that. And he's like, but we could have gotten more done, if you had just taken care of this recording assignment before you came into your lesson. I was like, okay. I was like, yeah, getting more work done, because I was starting to see some payoff from doing that work. And I had a professor, Dr. Chris Smith, who's the head of musicology at Texas Tech. He saw that I was supposed to be there, right? I was supposed to be a music student. I was doing well. But he also saw that there were distractors and other things that I was focused on. And he was willing to give me a little bit more of that tougher love. He would he was a very loving, compassionate, scary man. He's huge. He's like 6'4", giant dude. He used to be like a bouncer when he was in college. And he would come up and he'd like grab people by the shoulders and like thank them for being in the class. And I remember him telling me, like, you can go as far as you want. It's just up to you.
Ooh.
He's like, if you like what you're doing and you think this is what you want to keep doing, he's like, that's your choice. He's like, but as far as you want to go, you can take yourself. So I took that to heart very well and started to take graduate level courses at Texas Tech and doing more performing opportunities. And that's when, by the end of that, I was like, I think I've learned how to be like a semi-professional person. I think I've learned how to like not be a trash human. I'm going to sneeze soon. I don't know when.
I've been holding it back for about 5 minutes. So,
So,
Bless you.
thank you. So I learned how to not be trash. And I feel like I kind of learned how to not suck at my instrument. So I felt behind at that point. I felt like I had not wasted time, but I hadn't capitalized the way that I needed to.
Wait, sorry, you felt behind where at?
In comparison to other players my age
Okay.
that were thinking about going to grad school and playing. And I was looking at the tuba studio at Texas Tech specifically, which is just freaky. So I was seeing these guys in Dr. Wass's studio. They're like, yeah, well, I'm not going to go to grad school. I'm going to go be a teacher. Like, you're one of the freakiest euphonium players I've ever heard in my life. Like, you just won an international competition. And you're like, oh, well, yeah, I'm just a normal dude in the studio. So I saw those people going off and going to Indiana and going to Michigan, and thinking I wasn't where they were. So I didn't bet on myself going into my master's. Like, I need to go somewhere where I'm going to have a lot of one-on-one as much as I want. And I want somebody who's going to be just as invested in me as I am in myself and getting better. So I didn't audition anywhere for my master's that was like I said, or like a blue chip program. I wasn't auditioning at like a Juilliard or San Francisco Conservatory or anything like that. I auditioned places where I could go for free. And that was a good choice. I don't have debt for my master's degree. Dr. Mixdorf is a great teacher. I got what I needed. But at the end of that, I noticed another deficiency. And it was everywhere I've gone has been a good school, but a smaller school when we're talking about the music world. Not places that you would call a performance-driven program, right? I'm like, so if I really am serious about this, then I have to go to one of those, top places. I have to get that stamp on my name, right? So then I only audition at great places for my doctorate. Like, I'm only going to audition somewhere that I really do think changes my level of credibility by going there. So that's where UNT was the right choice, and it was absolutely the right choice. Dr. Mannix is phenomenal. She's been everything that I've needed and more. I call her my trombone mom. The performing experience that Professor Menard can bring in, and just the anecdotes that he has are phenomenal. And he has fantastic musical ears. No matter what you're playing, whether it's an excerpt or anything, he's thinking about it from that music standpoint. I was like, this is great, because I was very much so still a technician. And then Professor Baker, whatever you want to know about in the trombone world, he's like, well, let me tell you this very, very fantastic firsthand story about when I played at Lincoln Center. Or he's like, let me tell you, there's this gig I took once, this bass band, Battle Creek. It was okay. Like, and he'll just play those things. He's like, I was playing in the Dallas Opera last week and I had this thought. And he just has this wealth of information and is the most versatile trombone player I've ever encountered. So all of these were very different teaching styles. And at UNT, I think the biggest reason why it was that right choice is everybody that ends up going there has some sort of aspiration to be great, right? Whether or not they realize that, they know where they're going and why. So there were a lot of fantastic trombone players that showed up or that were already there, but it wasn't like a toxic competitive environment. Which was weird. I expected to go to one of these huge places and immediately, if I don't watch my horn or take it to the bathroom with me, someone will go in there and put like one tiny piece of duct tape on the inside of my slide or something, so I screw up at the audition. And it wasn't that at all. It was an incredibly supportive place with a ton of people that knew everybody else was busy, and the amount of high quality ensembles they were. If a guy was like, oh well, I didn't make the wind band that I wanted, but I made the 2 o'clock this semester, right? Or then people doing the 1 o'clock and not being able to do, the top orchestra. They conflict in time slots, but nobody's looking at them going like, oh well, he wasn't an orchestra, he had to settle for band. Like, oh well, he couldn't really make this ensemble or whatever, so he's in brass band or Latin jazz. People are like, yeah, I'm in Latin jazz. You're like, whoa, that's super cool. That ensemble's great. Like, yeah, I'm in brass band. I'm like, that's a idiom that I have not been exposed to as much. That's awesome. So everybody understood that people were busy and doing what they needed for themselves, and that their professors were leading them on the right track. So it was a really weird environment of how high quality people were, but how relaxed it felt as a studio. So I think that was really key in my development. And I think it hasn't come full circle, because that would imply that I'm just like partying again, right? I feel like I have fleshed out those things that I perceived as deficiencies. So it was definitely a great choice how I ended up getting here.
Word. How and with that, it's interesting looking back kind of, or I don't know if you ever listen to your old recordings. I try not to. But sometimes it's fun because you're more merciful looking back, going like, man, like, because it's like back then, you're so hard on yourself all the time to be like perfect, and it's probably a little bit unhealthy. And now I kind of listen back and you can hear, oh, I really like what I was going for. Like, you can hear the beginning of your trajectory. So how do you think, like, how are you a different teacher now, and how are kind of you a different player now? Like, because I mean, it sounds like you went through some big like paradigm shifts, and that totally changes not only your approach to teaching another human being, but treating your own self as a player, because you in essence are your own teacher.
Yeah. So I guess this will go back to the work that I had done and the product that I had being ratified by showing up and hearing myself play against these guys that won jobs the next semester. I thought even at the end of my master's that I was just like total trash. Like, I'm not good at my instrument. I was trying to buy practice by the pound. And what I mean by that is, let me see if I can go back to my schedule from back then.
You still have that around?
I probably do if I go far enough back in Google Calendar.
Hey, if you don't remember, I do. It was pretty crazy.
Yeah, I'm just how far back in time? We're in 2018. Yeah, and what I mean by trying to buy practice by the pound, it's like, well, if I'm in the practice room for 6 hours, then I'm gonna be awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And there wasn't as much, I don't think, commitment to really high quality practice. Oh, I'll wait to see if it loads, but it might be gone. But I remember I would practice like a 2-hour block in the morning, right? And then I would go to classes. Then I would have like an hour and a half in the middle of the day, another hour and a half a little bit later. Then I'd go home and come back for another 2-3 hours at night. So I was just going in and just blasting away, spending a lot of time and probably a lot of time that I didn't need. I think a big change is now I can get what I need accomplished in 2 hours rather than 6. And when Nick, you said you listen back to your old recordings, I'll listen back and I'll hear what I'm going for and I'll hear how hard I'm trying. But what I don't hear is efficiency or ease. It still sounds like I'm in my own way. So a big transition for me was more pre-planning before practicing, having a very clear goal and not letting myself fall into the minutia so easily. There is something to be said for just showing up and being like, all right, I have to learn a new thing. What's this at half speed? Great. I'm just going to play it at half speed for 2 weeks. And then I'll do it at 3/4 speed, right? Doing that. But I think there would be something more by taking a more holistic approach to the practice. So the first thing I would do before doing anything is I go in, I'm like, all right, I have to get organized. I have to understand my timeline for this. I have to understand what this piece is about, who wrote it, influences. Was there a goal behind this piece or were they just writing? And then going through and finding specific things that I know are going to be a problem for me. Like, great, so now I need to work this into my routine. So I'm working on a recital right now. And one of the things that showed up a lot was slurs down into the extreme pedal register. And I have a little bit of a deficiency with that. I think I've talked to you about a mouthpiece or a embouchure shift that I have. It's like, so I need to really make sure that I work on connecting these registers through this process. So I'm doing so. I really need to make sure that there's alternation between slurring and then very articulate technical passages. So I'm doing lip slurs that have articulation thrown in the middle of it. So making a clearer game plan rather than just going in and trusting like, well, I'm going to put in more time than anyone else, so it's going to work out. I think that's been a really, really big transition, and part of it was forced. Like Tuesdays at UNT, trombone choir meets at night. I would have an ensemble in the middle of the day. I would have long classes in the morning. So I'd be lucky if I got an hour and a half, 2 hours of practice in that day with the amount of other things that I had to do. And I would find myself getting through that 2 hours and having just done my routine. Like, all right, this isn't going to work out, right? I need to get more streamlined with this. So just really understanding what time frame I have and making a plan for that, I think was a really big shift for me. And I think that you can hear that in my playing as well. It doesn't sound like I'm just like going in there and being a jock, right? Like, and I'm not just going in there and like, well, he makes a good sound, but that's it. I'm putting more emphasis into those other levels, what makes it artistry. And what's going to keep me from achieving that artistic vision, which in my planning period, I now know what that is. So I know what I'm going for. I have a plan to do so, and I'm going to try to be as efficient as possible. I think that's been probably the biggest change.
Okay. And has that teaching done too? Because I mean, what's nice about like a place like Arkansas as a master's level student, is that as the dude that's the dog, you get like all this, to teach a bunch, where and correct me if I'm wrong, but at somewhere with a DMA or somewhere at UNT, you're probably not going to have the same amount of hands-on teaching experience that you would than if you're at a place that only has masters. So how has that teaching evolved? Because I was a hell raiser my first year. Like I would just chew people out. I figured out fast that a lot of stuff. So did you go through something similar?
I think that my teaching style is still pretty similar. I try to be approachable, and I want to be the professor that I would have needed. And I think that's stayed the same throughout. If anything, to the point where it feels too colloquial with students, where they're a bit too comfortable making jokes and messing around. And I have to tell them, like, okay, look, we can have a good time, but when it's time to work, it's time to work. Like, we got to be able to move through that. And if you can't do that, that's fine. I'll just have to adjust it. And they usually do what they need to after that. I think that by teaching more college age students as a TF, it opened my eyes to the efficiency that I needed as well, because I would have students come in and be pissed that it wasn't perfect. Like after a week, like, dude, you're like 17. Like, it's okay. You're not going to conquer the trombone in a day. So let's just take a step forward. That's it. That's all we have to do. Just don't let today be a 0 day. And you've gotten better. Like, there may be days where you sprint forward, and there may be days where it's a slug just to get a little bit better. I'm like, but I'm going to meet you where you are. As long as you're doing work, then I'm going to help you. And the only time I would really come at somebody and tell them they need to shape up or ship out would be when they weren't doing the work. And what that's evolved to is I need to extend myself that same grace sometimes. I need to extend myself like, well, yeah, it's not going to be perfect today, dude. Like, we'll tell it's going to be perfect. You just have to practice it again. Like, did you get better at something today? Yeah, you met that goal. This one didn't work out. Circle it in your practice journal, come back to it. So knowing that there was a plan really forced me to be more efficient, and seeing that students need to give themselves a little bit of grace helped me be more efficient. And then there was a transition of my teaching as well by the end of my fellowship. And I had realized that we only have so much positive energy that we can put towards work a day. There's only so much. And after that, you're either wasting time or being detrimental, right? So that transferred to my teaching as well, where I would tell students that just were clearly not going to do the work that they needed. I'm like, hey, so I just practiced for you right now and gave you strategies on how to do that. Like, do you feel more prepared right now? They're like, yeah. Like, well, go do that. All I'm doing as a teacher is teaching you how to practice. And if you take it from this room and you don't do anything with it, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. My first year at UNT, I was having like 2 a week lessons with students, like 1 hour-long fundamental session and then 1 like rep session, and just trying to give them everything that they needed. And being willing to go to students, and even if they hadn't done the work, like, okay, fine, I'll reschedule, I'll give you extra time. By the end, I was like, I'm not going to lose sleep over it. You didn't do the work. You're going to see how this pays off at the end of the semester, and it's not going to be on me. I guess I could have come across that like getting after them. But if like I said, I'm trying to be the teacher that I would need, and that happens to me when I'm a freshman or sophomore at Texas Tech, like probably hungover, like okay, like I don't care about you. You're obviously just way too into this. I wouldn't have connected with me. I needed people with patience and kind honesty. So that's what I try to have. I think that has been a transition, and I think it's made me a more efficient teacher, more approachable for students, and actually it helps me. When you teach something, you learn it again in a different way. Really having mastery over a concept is shown when you're able to help somebody go from A to B or make an improvement. So I think that has helped me as a player as well, those opportunities to teach upper level kids.
Mm-hmm. So this might be like a sticky subject, but I want to know.
Right.
Because when I was at North Texas, there was like the conversation of the mouthpiece to buzz or not to buzz. That is the question. And I just want to hear you go off on this a little bit. I just want to hear give me some Zach Davis opinion right now.
Cool. So I think the easiest opinion that I can have on it is it's a tool. You have to have the right tool for the right job. I go through periods of heavy buzzing periods and light buzzing periods, depending on what I think I need. Like right now, I'm in a very buzz light period. I do it to warm up a little bit, like 10, 15 seconds. And then from there, it's done. Unless I encounter something in my practice where I think that that's going to be the tool that is needed. I think a lot of people, if you deal in extremes, I can't trust you. If you say like you should always buzz, people that say you shouldn't buzz are like crazy. You should buzz for 30 minutes a day to every single tune you hear on the radio. I'm like, okay, so you're a crazy person. That's great. Like you haven't ever actually thought about what's going on the other side of this.
Only Sith stealing absolutes.
Yeah, only
Obi-Wan
that.
Kenobi.
There we go. Perfect. So, and those are the people that like would play something and it'd be out of time. Be like, oh well, I'll just buzz it. Or they'll just like constantly be cracking notes because they have no idea what the melody is. And rather than going like, oh, I should really be able to hear that melody, I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna buzz it. And then they buzz it to the wrong melody again. And they get worse. Right? It would be like if something was out of tune and I turned on a metronome. Right? The metronome's great. It's gonna help you, but it may not be the right tool for the job at that moment. And then people that are like, you should never buzz, you don't need an embouchure, vibration doesn't. There are people that go so far on that they say the lips don't even vibrate, that vibration starts halfway down the lead pipe. I'm like, I don't know about that because my face wobbles. Seems like that's vibrating. And then there are those people that they'll do something and let's say something's like really out of tune. They're like, oh well, it's just the air. And be like, do it again, like just focus on like the air or hear it better. Like, okay, well, this person is clearly not hearing the melody. Just saying, get on the other side of the bell, go do it, isn't going to help them. And things work for different people that go through different phases in their playing. The person that I've come to trust on the subject the most is David Vining. And that's because he says that he was incredibly naturally gifted. I imagine that means that he probably was like good at the trombone and then worked a lot. He got dystonia and he had to work through it. And he worked with Jan, who is a proponent of the no buzz, it's just air, just do it. And he recovered and he's able to play now. But he still does buzzing in his routines. It's not a lot. If you buzzed that way for a lot of band directors, I think they would say like, oh, that's really hollow, that's really thin, that's not going to translate to a good sound. But it's closer to what you're actually doing on the instrument. As opposed to a very like robust, lot of center type of vibration. So I am pro buzz, but just like all things, it has to be done in moderation. It has to be the right tool for the job. And I guess just like a lot of other things, you can end up hurting yourself if you're not doing it the right way or for the right reason. I mean, that could go to slide technique. That could go to valve technique, right? Do all sorts of things. You could hurt yourself if you're doing it wrong. So I go for a very light, almost hollow, airy buzz. I use it when something just really isn't connecting, or I'm feeling super stiff from the day before and I just need to blow out some of that lactic acid. Or the last buzz heavy period that I really went to was I got a new horn. And I think it was the first time I'd had a new instrument in like 10 years almost.
Wow.
So, I had no idea how this stinking thing worked. It's so different. So I needed to make sure that I was really getting into the center of the horn and I was doing what I needed to do in the most efficient way to create sound. And rather than just muscling it about on the instrument, I found that mouthpiece work helped me know that what was going on here was correct. And then when I put it on the horn, if I needed to adjust from there, I was doing it from a place where I was informed rather than just shooting in the dark. So that's the last real buzz heavy phase that I went through. And by buzz heavy, I mean like buzzing the lip slur before I play it, like buzzing portions of the long tones before I play it, buzzing through a chimera before playing it, just to make sure that what I was doing was going to align with the instrument. And now that I know this instrument well, and I feel much more comfortable about my slotting and embouchure efficiency, it doesn't come into my practice as much. But there could be a period where I go through it again. Let's say I get a job. Let's say we all play on, I don't know, like these titanium lead pipes. The instrument's going to be different. It's going to feel different. And I'm going to try to do what I was doing before. When learning that new piece of equipment, I do think that buzzing is something that you can do to make sure that you're in the center and making your best sound.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna have to pause this right there because we're coming close to the end of the Zoom allotment of recording time.
Yeah.
So we're gonna hop over to part 2. Yeah. So we'll just meet there, and then we'll pick up with more questions there.
You got it. I'll be there first.
Okay.